A common problem in drawing architecture is that the sort of drawing style and technique that we develop in this subject area often doesn't work very well when it comes to drawing architectural sculptures. And a lot of neoclassical architecture has a lot of architectural sculpture, particularly the mass groups we have in pediments of large public buildings. In this video, I talk about the way I've come to see these figures differently, to see them more as architecture than as figures, and this enables me to use the same technique as architecture when I draw them. In most cases, the sculptures placed in pediments have a symmetrical feel to them, while the figures themselves aren't exactly symmetrical. The way they're positioned and the way they're grouped together does create a balance on left and right, and there's often some central figure or motif for them to be symmetrical around. In this view of the German Reichstag building in Berlin, it's a coat of arms with the imperial eagle on it. So it's very important that we capture the sense of symmetry. It's possibly going to be, at a glance, the most obvious thing about this pediment. And so at a glance, we want our drawing to look symmetrical. So I take a fair bit of care to position this shield symmetrically. And then I start with the figures on each side, which are the main figures, the most prominent. I take great care to draw the head and position it. Now, I'm not seeing these as figures. I'm seeing them as various shapes and lines. And so when I draw the head, I draw a line for the shoulders underneath. I work out where the waist is going to be, and then I put the legs in. I don't draw arms as arms. I see them as basically long, pointy cones that are bent or not bent, or perhaps rectangles. And by doing this, I don't try and draw arms and legs, which always end out of proportion. I pay particular attention to spots such as the waist and the elbows and the knees, because if I position these spots correctly in relation to the head, the figure really can't help but roughly be in the right pose. It's really just a pose I'm after. I'm often not really drawing figures at all, just negative space and shadows. But in this drawing, the scale is such that I need to have some sense of the figures, a stronger sense than I usually draw. After the two central figures on each side, there is a very small figure which I leave for a moment, and I position the larger figures on each side of those. And it's exactly the same principle. I draw the head. I position the head in relation to the things I've already drawn. So I look at my reference photo and say, okay, well, the head is sort of roughly the center of the shield. And I try and do that as much as my proportions in my drawing will allow me. But in the end, I position the head so it will look okay in my drawing. And it's the same thing. The shoulders, a straight line. I try and position the waist in the right place under the head. And then depending on the position, if they're sitting, I'm often just drawing the front of a leg, as is the case in this case. So I'm just drawing a very long, skinny, upside down cone, basically. The other leg is bent underneath. But the important thing is to get the spot where the knee, top of the knee is, and where the foot hits the ground. Because we're suggesting a figure. And these figures are even less obvious than the two standing figures on each side of the shield. When it comes to the decorative elements at the very end, on each edge of these groups of people, some parts I'm not even sure what they are, but I'm just drawing the effects. I don't need to know what is this. Is it a musical instrument? Are they farming instruments? Are they weapons of war? I really want to just capture the basic shapes, because these areas are not going to get a huge amount of attention. They won't attract attention unless we somehow draw them badly. We put too much detail there, put something that doesn't look right for the perspective angle we're looking at. These are just spots where we want to create effect, because when we look at the photograph of these sculptures, we're not really looking at any one part of it, except perhaps for the shield, where the more simple shape makes it stand out. I'm adding these details now on the extreme right-hand side of the pediment. And then it's done. Similarly with the lettering, it's important not to think of it as words or letters, but to see it as a pattern. And so always work out where is the center. You can see me counting. Where is the center of our inscription and how does it line up architecturally? And so the S is our middle letter and it lines up just to the left of the base of the shield. And then I work in each direction, trying to keep the proportions correct. My lettering is a little bit large in this instance. But again, the important thing that the effect is symmetrical and that it doesn't look overly crowded into the space, that we have a little bit of space at each end as well as between the words. So don't write left to right, but see it as a pattern that you want to space out equally, and it will become a much easier thing to do. It's also important to get the perspective right with the letters, though in this case there's not a great deal of perspective because we're almost seeing the inscription straight on. I hadn't planned to draw these capitals, but I've had so much fun drawing the rest of it that I think, oh, I just don't want to stop. The important thing is to spread these capitals evenly across the portico. So I position them with care using the reference photo as my reference and the center of the capitals. But the important thing to notice at the start is that each capital changes appearance as it goes from left to right. We see more of the left-hand side on the extreme right capital than we do on the left, which is almost front on. And that difference changes bit by bit as we move from left to right. So we need to make sure we capture that. The first capital takes a little bit longer because I have to work out how much detail I'm going to show and how I'm going to represent it with my lines, because then I want to use that same level of detail and that same type of line work as I move across, because that will make sure that all my capitals look the same. It's really important that they don't grow longer or wider as they move across, that the top of each column itself sits at the same spot horizontally. But then it simply becomes a case, once I've worked all those things out, of making sure that I draw the actual view of the capital that I can see for that column, not simply copy the one I've done before. And again, careful observation is so key and so important. And by now I'm wishing I had enough paper to draw the entire facade of the Reichstag, but that maybe will wait for another drawing for another video. This photo is on my community page if you want to have a go at drawing this pediment sculpture set yourself. And if you do, I hope you put the columns on as well. And then that's pretty much it. Here we have it. What do you think? I'm happy with how it's turned out. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Have you noticed the common theme in so many of my videos and in so much of what I say? Don't see a head, see the shape of a head. Don't see a body, don't see a figure, don't see arms and legs. See points where shapes change direction and position those points in relation to other points and then join them up or shade the gap between them. Don't see letters, don't think of letters, don't think of words. See shapes and patterns and do your best to copy the pattern without trying to see a word. And all of this emphasizes the fact that our biggest problem is that we don't observe carefully enough. We have to trick ourselves to pay more attention by not thinking, oh, it's 3 words. I know what those 3 words are. And just writing the 3 words and not actually capturing the key characteristics of these words, these letters, in this position. And so we don't get it right. We don't see the subtle change in shape that this perspective has caused. We don't see perhaps foreshortening. That means the letters get narrower as they move slightly further away from us down the inscription, or whatever it is with this particular reference. And particularly with figures, we think, oh, it's an arm. And so we stop looking at our reference photo and we start to draw an arm. But the arm we draw from our memory is not the arm that we would have observed if we observed our reference really carefully, especially when foreshortening is involved and we don't see a great deal of the arm because of the angle. But because we're thinking of that part of the arm that we can't actually see, and we haven't seen carefully enough to see that we can't see it, we draw it thinking it was there, and then we wonder why our drawing doesn't look right. And we think it's too hard to draw. No, it's not too hard to draw. I just haven't seen what I'm trying to draw without all these preconceptions. And that's really encouraging because it means we're all much better drawers than we think we are. I'm really not good at figure drawing, but by learning not to see figures, I've learned to draw the figures in a way which is much more accurate and also suits my architectural style for my buildings. So I hope this has been helpful. As I said in the video, this reference photo is on my community page if you'd like to print off a copy and have a go at drawing it yourself. Remember, in the end, we're drawing the effect of all the sculptures. We're not drawing the detail of the sculptures. And so we don't even have to see every part of it clearly, just as we don't see all the leaves clearly to draw the effects of the leaves on a tree. So it may be challenging, but it's a great challenge. So have fun trying it. I'll see you next time. Bye.